Joining me now are the Country Director of Action Aid, Andrew Mamedu, and Agricultural Consultant, Achalu David. Gentlemen, good to see you, and thanks as always. We've discussed this before. The worst that can happen to any country is food shortage, famine. Then the desperation can't be imagined. But again, this is it, an attempt from the government. It would seem as if it hasn't actually reached the receiving end. So, Mamedu, help us so that we avert what we experienced during the NSAS riot. Recall that a lot of people saw how some politicians warehoused palliatives, and the government had thought that those palliatives had already been distributed. Here we are again. How do we avoid a deja vu scenario?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we should have learned. So hopefully what we are experiencing now would be at best logistical challenge. But clearly, with the emergency we have in the food sector, I think these are times we need to fast track. More so with the whole call across the country, some people talking about protests just around the corner. So we shouldn't play into such hands. We should be able to work out our logistics. So the COVID palliative is an example you were talking about. And if you go back about this time last year, there was at about August last year. So we also had the palliative where states got 5 billion and some trucks of rice as well, and maize and all of that. But clearly, it did not get to all the people that it ought to have got into. So I think this is one too many. We should have learned lessons from those and ensure that it is not repeated. Maybe the process where we have been using is not working. So we keep using the same process. So we've been using politicians. Yes, these are state structures. So we go through the governors, we go through the local government, we go through the senators. So you had some senators debating that, oh, we will get just one truck while the governor gets this number of trucks. So sometimes they see it as political settlements, as against what it ought to be, which is supposed to be, let it get to the poorest of the poor. So it's palliative, it's just for a short term to cushion some effect. But again, the debate around, is this adequate? Of course, is very grossly inadequate, but a good start, a good deal, but it's something that we need to pursue and implement it properly.
Well, David, the government is flipping the script very quickly and fast, so, but it doesn't look like it's catching on, as Andrew Mamedu has highlighted. How do we avert this? You're an agricultural expert and a consultant. Sharing of food items can be, very, very tasking, especially in a country where data is almost absent in terms of those that will be needing it. How do you think the government should go about this, since the old ways have failed?
Oh, yes. So first off, I'd like to state that I'm just generally not in support of food palliatives to start with, mostly because we've done this in the past. We've done this multiple times, and it just did not yield any impact. Like he mentioned, there was one that was done in August, I think 5 trucks per state. Outside of that, there was one done in December, there was another done in April, and now we are still doing it again, and there's really no impact. So I believe, as opposed to doing this same thing over and over again, we should instead focus on policies and measures that actually work.
And would you mind, tell us, if you will, such policies? I'll come back to Action Aid to see what template they do have that may work. But again, as an expert working in that sector, and you say you're not for that, but what should the government do for people around the country who are in dire need of food?
Yes, I do think that we should focus on sustainable farming, implementing technology, subsidizing raw materials and input for smallholder farmers, and ensuring that this time around it gets to the people that actually need it. Because with regards to this food palliative, we have 20 trucks moving to each state. They're about, I think the figure I said last year was that there were like 15 million poor households. If you calculate that in terms of persons, there are about 133 million people living below the poverty line. So when you split the 20 trucks to each person, it basically means that each poor person gets just 257 naira worth of rice, which doesn't really do anything. So I think those kind of funds should be targeted into building community irrigation systems to ensure that smallholder farmers can farm all year round, ensuring that security is just right so that people can go to their farms without having to fear for their lives. So I think focus should be there as opposed to trying to get political points with what we're saying right now.
David, this is it. The problem is that now the people are already hungry, so you need to feed before you can actually activate the small-time farming scheme that you spoke about. Andrew, you've done this before, and you would agree, as highlighted by you, using some politicians who claim to have the data of their constituents hasn't actually helped us as a people. What should Nigeria be doing at this point in time to ensure that people are okay and not get really uptight and troop out?
Yeah, I agree with David totally. So we need to look at long-term measure. However, like you said, so long-term, there's no way we're going to get food on the table right away. So the only way we need to get food on the table right away is for us to deal with palliative. But like I said, palliatives are what they are. They're called palliatives. It means you're just cushioning some effect in the short run. But in the long run, these are the measures we need to put in place. We ActionAid, we did a research recently speaking to our group of 2 million smallholder women farmers. And 70% of them said two issues were top on that list, about 5 top issues, but I'll just talk about 2 of them. So it talked about farm inputs. So farm inputs with regards to seedlings, fertilizers, and then another 70% said issue of insecurity. They're not able to go to their farms to produce what they ought to produce. So now that we are dealing with this palliative, just to say that, to put it in context, I don't know if you know what 1 module of rice is. 1 module of rice is about 1.25 kg. So 1 module of rice, with all of this, distributing it for 133 million, you have about 6-7 persons sharing from 1 module of rice. That is what it practically means. If you have 133 million persons, and this project is about 40 billion. Just to share this rice, yes, it's going to cost us close to about 40 billion naira with the current cost of rice. So, but that is still so insufficient. So we need to look at the long term and the sustainability of all of these. So how often do we come with palliatives? So palliatives is not supposed to be a recurrent thing. So we have run 4 or 5 palliatives within this current government. So how do we make sure that we deal with the long term thing? The irrigation, the issue of insecurity, dealing with the smallholder women farmers, ensure they have access to credit facility, low interest credit facility that would enable them expand their produce. Till date, smallholder women farmers still do not have access to adequate land. So even the small land they have, insecurity drives them away from those land. But with the ones they even have, it's not even adequate. So men still take possession of them. Big industrialists still take possession of those lands. So clearly, these are things that we need to work with. However, if we're dealing with palliatives, we need to look at social register. We have said this over and over again. So I'm hoping that we're about concluding the social register, where the social investment program and things like this would be lashed upon. We have civil society organization, we've got individuals, we've got religious groups that can support in distribution of such palliatives so that it's even accounted for. So we are talking about one module to 6-7 persons. And at the end of the day, most of this food will be kept in some warehouses, some in some politicians' houses. But even if it does, that's the quantity they will get. But it's not even going to get to the people. So clearly, people have got to rise up, and the distribution list should be shared. So how many did Solomon get? How many did Andrew get? How many did each person get? Who are those that got it? There should be faces. There should be names to these people that are getting these things. I think that is what civil society like ours should be up and running and doing to make sure that we hold the government accountable.
If I wrap up this with David quickly, I'll stay with you for just a minute. Does the government or governments, state, federal, and now, thankfully, local government,
yes.
do they, contact, for instance, NGOs or other civil society groups like ActionAid to help them, since you already have a sense of how that social register should go? Okay,
so without mentioning name, I know you just spoke about Dangote Foundation. About a few months ago, they did something like this. They distributed, I think, about 10 to 15 trucks of rice per state across the country. So they did that, and they worked with NGOs. So they said, oh, ActionAid, could you give us a list of credible NGOs that you can vouch for? There are NGOs, there are organizations that can do this. And so the way it's done, you go to these households or you go to these communities, and by themselves, they identify the poorest of the poor, those that eat from the same pot. So there are clear methods where these have worked in the past, and they are the ones that help in distributing this. And it goes very scot-free, very easily, and at the end of the day, everyone that ought to get, everybody is satisfied. There are no troubles around that.
I see you nodding your head to that, David. Let's close with you. You spoke about insecurity, you talked about famine implements and so many other things. And now I'd like to rest it on the step of the grassroots government, the local government, now that they're getting some kind of a verve, some kind of power. Let's hope that nothing untoward happens. What more do you expect from the grassroots to help these small-time farmers? Because by the time they go back to the fields, to seem as if Nigeria and even the continent will be okay.
Yes, so I think with regards to grassroots engagement, there's a lot of capacity building that is needed, a lot of training and orientation. The private sector as well as development partners, they're already doing their bit to ensure that, but then there's still the components that requires public sector participation, especially with regards to programs and initiatives like this. So I also read a report that CBN gave the Ministry of Agri access to 2.1 million bags of fertilizers, I believe. So really, the local governments, they have a key part in playing to ensure that it gets to the smallholder farmers that need it, and not just getting to them, but that they are able to use it for exactly what it is for. So that's really the only way that we can ensure food security, because right now, I just even read that we've opened up borders. We are having like some sort of tax-free period for like 150 days for some food products, which is basically like a temporary solution to a permanent problem. It's like putting a bandage over a bullet wound. It may stop temporarily, but at some point it's going to get back in.
Well, I see a sense of this conversation being sustained, and Horizons will stay on this. I'd like to thank you for your time, Andrew, Mamedu, and Achalu David. Thank you for coming on.